Hi, this is Rodrigo from Frame Freak Studio, and this is the Creative Hostler Show. Today, our guest is a special invited. Her name is Alina Chau. She has more than 10 years in experience in the animation industry. We found her work through CTNX last year, and also a recommendation from Casey Robin. And she has an amazing experience doing animation work, as she has worked in projects such as the Clone Wars, the 3D version from Cartoon Network, God of War, Spyro, and many other games. So welcome, Alina.
Hello, thank you, Rodriguez.
So can you tell us a little bit, for the people who don't know about you, how was your history? How did you got into art? Was something that you were doing since you were a kid, or was something that you took up later in life?
Generally speaking, I always like to draw. When I was a kid, I draw for fun, and that's kind of one of the activities give me out of troubles. So when I was applying to college, that's when the time you kind of start figure out what you want to do with life, and that's kind of in the 90s, late 90s. So I decided to explore, well, back in the days, they call it digital graphic communication. I grew up in Hong Kong. So I figure it sounds like good new media. So I applied for it. So that's how I eventually get into animation. I learned a little bit, it's undergraduate program. So you learn a little bit of graphic design, photography, animation, kind of a little bit of everything. And at the end of the my undergraduate degree, I discovered I like animation the best. So, and then I applied to UCLA animation and then focus studying animation. That's kind of how I get into the industry. And after I graduated from UCLA, I work as a 3D animator for various studio. First job is with EA Games, and then with Technicolors, and then my last job with Lucasfilms. So I was trained as a 2D animator, but by the time I graduate from school, there's not much 2D animation left. So everyone is doing 3D, so I kind of switched gear to 3D. But over the years working as a 3D animator, I kind of miss drawing because that's my roots and that's what I enjoy doing. So at the end of the workday, sometimes I draw for fun. I start drawing for fun because partly you imagine you stare at two giant monitor all day at work. At the end of the day, you really don't want to look at any monitor. I don't even feel like watching TV that much. Your eye just get tired. So a lot of the time I just like draw or read comic books, and it started as just drawing for fun. More and more doing more elaborate painting for myself, and I guess slowly get good at it. And sometimes I do that at work where I'm waiting for the computer to render quick times for animation tests. And one day my coworker kind of say, hey, they know someone at Pixar is doing a Totoro Forest show and they're looking for artists, and asked me whether I'm interested to participate. So I'm like, sure, yeah. So that's kind of how I eventually get started and consider to do painting a little bit more seriously. I don't know whether that answered your question.
Yeah, you definitely did. How did you feel the transition from going from 2D art to 3D? I interviewed many people so far, and there were many people who found that transition really hard. Some of them weren't even able to do it. So, how was your experience doing that transition?
I actually at school, so going back to 2D, well, partly also initially intention is really just to self-entertaining after work. So I have no pressure. I think that I would say for some people, if they are under pressure, you have to switch gear to do from, say, 3D to 2D or 2D to 3D. For job situation, I think that is more pressure psychologically, and it wouldn't be as enjoyable. But since for me, in the beginning, I do 3D at home and I do drawing, it's just for my own entertainment. So I'm not even thinking they have to look good, or they have to be presentable, or they have to be marketable. It's pure just for fun. So I think that is the huge difference. And since for the first couple of years, I do that just pure as a hobby for fun. And when the social media thingy become popular, I just post it on social media. And my intention is not really trying to get any business or gain followers. It's like, well, I got all this drawing and other artists post their stuff. And if I post on the forum, you get to meet other artists, you chat about stuff you enjoy. So for me, it's just a fun thing to do in the beginning. So I think that is the huge difference. So for a very long time, I just do it for fun. And then eventually when my art start getting a little bit more busy, start get picked up by gallery and get publisher attention and client attention, that's when I slowly consider to make it a business. But by then it has been many years has passed. So I can't get to the point that I'm a little bit more comfortable in my shoe in terms of the drawing and painting. So I think that probably would take off a lot of pressure, because it's not so much do it for survival in the beginning.
Awesome. Also, something that I wanted to ask you, because you have the experience, I know many people who are in countries where it is not the best place to learn art or become animators or illustrators, and it is really obvious that they have to make the jump to a country that allows them, or a city that allows them to do that. But obviously that creates a little bit of fear because it's something new and you're comfortable here and everything that you know is here. So I had to do that for myself a couple of months ago. And how was your experience doing that, going from Hong Kong to Los Angeles?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I was lucky. I do that at a younger age when I'm still in school. So I think I do it at the age when you don't know how to scare. It's like your dream. It's like you got this big dream, idealism. You don't really know about the reality and the difficulty and the potential danger. So it's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to pack up and go to a different country and study animation. So I have to say part of it is the naivete at a really young age. So I just got this dream. It's like, oh, I will go to America, it'll be fun and chill and everything will be awesome. Like like when you watch TV, and back in the days when I'm like late teen, like I watch teen movie and American teen show. It's like you see beach and beautiful people skating. So that's my oh, you be like some, but then once I get here, that I do reality start to hit. You realize a lot of the other people in class. I remember my first year, many people in my class, they're definitely already much better trained than I am. They're much more skilled, and also I realize I have a lot that I don't know. So it's slowly, I slowly realize there's a lot to catch up, but at the same time, I'm also just very excited because you get to see a lot of things that I never see back home. And Hong Kong, it has a good film industry, but the animation is not very strong. So when I get here, I'm just so excited to see so many animation and art that I would never have the chance to receive that kind of education. So even though it get to, at one point, reality start to hit, it's like there's a lot to learn. But at the same time, there's so many new things I also get very excited about learning. So I think partly is the being young and naive, and wash away some of the fear. But I do, but there is something that is reality. I think for a foreigner, there's you always have some extra thing you have to deal with. Like when I graduate, or even during school, I can't get a job outside of the school because that's part of the immigration restriction. On a student visa, you cannot say you can't take any job outside of school. So you have to only work for the school, or if you take a job outside of school, it has to be related to your major or particular type of job. So unlike local student, if they want, they can part-time work for studio, do a gig here, do a gig there, just to gain experience. But for international student, I don't know whether the policy changed this day, but back in the days, there's a lot of restrictions. So I cannot work outside of school. If I have to work outside of school for a studio, there's a lot of paperwork. And even after I graduate from school, you have to apply for a working visa. I don't think the political situation improved that much since. So and so even you still work in the industry, that the type of job you can apply is kind of restricted to the condition of the visa. So it's a challenging, and it's definitely something a lot of foreigner or immigrants have to deal with, and that process could last for a decade. For me, it's a 15-year struggle to deal with the whole visa situation. But at the same time, it's something, if I think back, will I do it again, knowing all the difficulty and challenge I will be facing? I would say yes, because I think what I gain is more than what I give up. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, it was really amazing answer. Also, I think that you work in some of the games that I love the most, like Gears of War and God of War as well. Like, I'm kind of a gamer of my free time. So something I didn't have this opportunity before, because so far the people that I interview are going more into films and animation and stuff. But this is the first time that I have somebody who has contributed so much to the game industry. So I wanted to ask you, how was your experience in animating for a video game? Was there something different from doing traditional animation or films, or was kind of the same?
In terms of animation, generally speaking, it's similar process. I think the biggest difference is with game, since like with movie and TV, it's longer sequence. There's like continuous story, and in a scene, if there's a group of people, you animate the whole scene at the same time. But with games, since everything is AI based, so you can't just animate one character and design the animation individually for the movement. So the thought process is a little bit different. But this on the animation end of the production is actually fairly similar to a regular animation studio. I guess the only difference is that with games, you don't do a continuous sequence. You break each sequence into chunks. Say walking, you do different walk, and then running, you do different run, and you do different attack. And when you animate, all those are separate elements, and then they will put all those elements together in the programming end. And also when the player play the game, so the character animation will respond accordingly to how the player play the game. So in that sense, it's much more spontaneous. Unlike film and TV, you can't just design the whole movement. There's no interaction between the players and between the people who watch the show and the show itself. So the process, some of the detail is slightly different, but overall, as an animator, the task, the animation principle, acting, weight, all those is fairly much the same.
And on the side of handling the team, like again, like animation is a really complex process to do. It takes a team making it. So how do you, like, did you have to deal with like developers or the writers of the video game and things like that? How was the interaction with the team itself on creating these video games?
It's actually kind of similar to a regular TV or movie studio production. each team divided into different tasks. And with animation, there's someone do the screenwriting, that's writers, but we don't really interact with the writers. There is director and producer. Usually that will be the people we interact more or more directly work with. And usually the director will communicate with, say, the animation supervisor and say, okay, here is the story of this level, and this is what we need, and there's a film script, and then they will share the script with the animation team, and then we will each assign a part of the script to animate. So in that sense, it's actually fairly similar to how a TV and movie would be functioning. The slightly different is after we finish animation, we do have to export our animation and send it to the game design and the programming team, and they will plug in the animation and do tests, make sure the animation flow well in the program. And you didn't have, like, sometimes because with games, you kind of have to have the first and last post has to hook up with whatever next post that will make sense in the game. So they will do a lot of those testing, make sure all the animation look good in the program, the frame rate, the movement, coherence when they stitch all the different animation. So usually that they have a testing process, and if there's something need to be improved or revised, they would communicate with the animator, and we will share the notes and look at the video and say, oh, maybe this couple of frame we need to improve a little bit, or maybe push this a little bit. So the last bit of it is slightly different, but overall it's not too far off. So on a game animation team, it's fairly common you have animator that have worked on movie or TV show, and you have the same group of people in the industry. They kind of circle around. Sometimes people work on a movie project, they go to game project, and then they jump back on movie or TV. So it's because the skill is kind of similar, so it's pretty easy to jump from one project to the other.
Awesome. Also, you mentioned before that you like more doing illustration 2D with your hands. What is it that you like more than 3D or other form of art?
I think with the illustration is I can easier to come up with my own content, my own intellectual property. I guess if I want to do that, I can do that with animation or film. I can come up with my own story or make my own films, but that process is just much more labor intensive. Making an animated movie or even an animated short, it's just, you need so much more time and resources. And so with illustration, I can still write my own story, come up with my own intellectual property, and make it myself a little bit just more manageable than making a films. So I feel for me is, in terms of working, I like both, but in terms of the creativity and freedom, I feel like illustration, at least for me, is much more manageable for one person to do it all and get it done within a reasonable time frame, get it published, and get it out there and get attention. So that's the difference. So for me, it's more a relatively more accessible way to develop a personal intellectual property.
Great. This question that I'm going to ask you is a little bit tricky, but I think it's important. What was something that you didn't completely expected from your career that became true and is important in your professional career?
Something unexpected. That is tricky. Well, the first thing come up in my head, I don't think it's something unique to me. I'm sure is a lot of people have similar experience. Is when I first graduated from school to get a real job. What happened is I graduated year of 2001 from school, and that is when we get into recession. The year we plummet into recession from very good economy, general economy is good. That's when the whole economy start to drop, And a couple of months after I graduated from school, we got 9/11, and the whole country, whole world declared war. So it is already tricky for any new graduate to get a job in any situation. But that year, when the world politics and everything goes downhill, and you graduate at that time, and the animation industry also, that's the transition year. They transition from 2D to 3D, so there's no job in the industry for 2D, and a lot of studios are not hiring at the time because they are trying to figure out how they want to reorganize the company to develop 3D shows. So for around that time, there's no job in the industry. So it was unexpected, and also when you are a student, kind of young, and start going to the real world, at least for me, in my head, you think, oh, it's hard, but it's not going to be that bad. I just spent a couple of months working hard, looking for a job, then I'll be okay. But then when all that happened, it's like, oh, snap, there's no job. We are in a recession. It's like everyone has no job. It's not just because you're a student, you can't get a job. It's that everyone has no job. You can't have to find a way to survive. On top of that, I was a student, international student on student visa, trying to get a working visa. And after 9/11, suddenly all the immigration law changed overnight. So everything goes wrong that year. So it was unexpected in that sense. But I remember I told myself, there's many nights I was so worried, not able to get a job, and I could get deported out of the country. There's many sleepless nights and panic attack at night and start crying. But I also remember one thing. I always tell myself, if I can survive that year and somehow manage to find a job and able to stay in the country and get my working visa, I think I can survive most challenge years to come in the industry, because that's kind of a reality check, is that life can go really difficult and very unexpected. So it might not be the worst thing in life, but I remember if I can survive getting a job without getting deported out of the country, I think I can handle most challenge down the road. So that would be the thing that will always stay in my mind. Even till today, whenever I have really rough time, and in 2013, I decided to quit my day job at the studio, which is a really good job, and do independent. The early transition was rough, even though it's my own decision. But I always remember, I go back. At least this is my choice. It's bad. You suddenly go from high income to no income by choice. But there's no way it'll be as worse as back in the day when I first started. So I think that's always the lesson, always come back to me whenever I get a rough patch, and say, it can't be that bad. It's not as bad as that one time. So if I can do it at the time with zero experience, survive, get a job, stay in America without getting deported back to my country, I think I can handle a lot of the challenge coming years to come, because animation is a fun industry, but at the same time, it's also a very challenging industry with a lot of up and down. But it's good. When it's not so good, it is a bit of a struggle for a lot of people, and it's not easy industry. So I remember, if I can survive recession, war, deportation, being a student, can't find a job, I think should be able to handle any new challenge years to come, and just be grateful. I'm not worried about being deported anymore.
Awesome. Also, on the other hand, what was something that was completely expected from your part that became true and is important in your career?
Something expected and came through. That's another tricky question. I guess I would say probably a little bit more recent. I mean, there's a lot of those moments whenever you apply for a job that you want and you get it. It and you get what you want from the job, and you actually gain a lot more than you gain. That's always a good feeling. I think Lucasfilm is one of those jobs. I think it's a wonderful. I I wouldn't say I'm expected, but it's one of those jobs I do want, and then when I get it, it's better than I expected because it's a great company. I meet a lot of great coworkers, eventually become very good friends, and working at a very beautiful environment that is better than I expected. We get to work at Skywalker Ranch. So that was really fun for me for a few years. So that's one of the experience. I gained a lot out of that job, learn how to be a better storyteller, get to work with pretty close hierarchy, working with George, and definitely a great crew. And then I guess my second experience, probably about 2 years ago, I'm looking for a new literacy agent, and I find a very good agent, and she has been very supportive with my career. So it's still early. My career in publishing is still very early compared to many people. It's just only a few years old, which is nothing compared to what most people already have in a more well-established situation. But I feel like finding someone who can really help me to launch the career is important. And so far, it's slow, but it's good. And I just finished my first story, graphic novel idea, and we are sending it out. So that's kind of exciting. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of those moments in the industry, but hard to list them.
Nice. Also, I see that you are producing a new book, uh,
Mhm.
and this is something topic that many people. I see many artists wanting to do a book, but they lack the knowledge of doing so.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about the process of how did you get, like, where did you get the idea? Then on the process of producing, working on the book itself, getting it published. How has been your experience in doing so?
Oh yeah. In the very beginning, I just do it myself. Kind of like a lot of artists, they are doing it. You make your own book the way you want, and you try to self-publish either out of pocket or Kickstarter type. But I do a little bit in the beginning with Kickstarter, just mostly my art book, and then I experiment to work with local smaller publisher, and I enjoy working with publisher because they know what they're doing more than I do. So there's someone who can guide me along and give me much clear parameter. Um, so with local publisher is good because they are not as corporate and that's more family owned. It's easier to communicate with them and work with them. So I kind of do a book with a local publisher in San Francisco for in the beginning and get some experience. After that, I realized I do enjoy the process. I want to do it a little bit more professionally. So I start applying for agency. One thing is because I know I don't know at all about how publishing functions. So I don't trust myself to do it myself because it's a pretty complicated process. So I applied for agency and then this day I can't do it through the agency. And usually the process is I come up with an idea. In the beginning, sometimes it's just really rough idea, as rough as it would be equivalent to just a few pages of notes in the notebook, nothing polished. And then I will discuss with my agent and say, what do you think about this and that idea? And usually the agent, they're in the business for many years, so they know what content is more marketable and more appropriate to pitch. And they usually wouldn't interfere with my creativity, but they will give really good positive input. And she said, oh, I think this is a good idea, but what do you think about you present it in this way or that? So they give feedback and I go back and think about it some more, come up with some rough draft. and I will share with the agent for feedback. So over time, pretty much back and forth, I come up with the draft of the story. And once she feel like it's pretty good enough and pretty polished, then she would send out the script to publishing houses, editors for potential acquisition consideration. That's kind of usually how it works with a more traditional publishing route. But I also know a lot of artists, they start do it your own kind of self-publishing, and they do it really successfully with Kickstarter, which is also another good route. Say, some people prefer fiction, because with traditional publishing, even though as a creator you still have, I would say, over 95% of creative freedom, but you still have to work with some kind of corporation to get your work out. So there will be a little bit limitation. You do own your copyright and you do have most of the creative right, but more or less you are working with a company, so there will be a little bit of restriction. But some people, if you prefer to have 100% freedom, something like a online crowdfunding would be a good place to start. You do exactly the way you want. You do a successful crowdfunding and do your own printing. And I know I have a few friends, and I know there are people in the industry, that's how they started, and they do really successful self-publishing, and it get attention from the publishing world, and then they get a contract through starting as on themselves, and then eventually they get a contract with bigger houses because they have a proof that they can do it really well on their own. So that is almost like a portfolio in a way, that people say, oh my gosh, you can do really good books, so they just sign with them right away. So I have seen those kind of situations as well. So there's many ways to do this.
Awesome. So, this is a question that I wanted to ask you. What do you see as the most common mistake people make when they are trying to become an artist as a professional that they do not are aware that they are making?
That's a good question. I think one thing I felt, I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but it's something I see. I feel like there's a lot of younger artists. It's tricky because I wouldn't say it's a mistake, because I can understand the intention. There's a lot of artists, especially when they're new, their desire is to try to get jobs or get to work for a certain company, and they would try to draw exactly like the more commercial look, be really good at drawing a particular commercial look, because either they're fans of that genre or they really want a job for a certain company. So it's not a mistake to do that, because it's important to have job and put food on the table. But I feel like a lot of the time when people focus doing commercial style work, over time they lost their own voice, and they kind of lost their own style, because you are so focused doing commercial work. At one point, all the work is beautifully drawn in a particular commercial style, but you kind of lost your own voice, and sometimes it's hard to go back and find your voice as the year go by. It's not impossible, it just becomes a little bit more challenging. Or sometimes people would get burned out doing commercial work too long and forgot to do work for themselves. So I would say the most important thing is why it's very important to keep up the commercial skill. Always reserve energy to create your own art. That's just for yourself, and do it for fun. The art you create for yourself, you don't need to be too judgmental how it looks, because it's not for commercial reason. It's just for yourself, for your own soul and happiness. And I think that's important, because I feel like one thing with artists, art is so much part of our life. It's our career, but it's also our personality. It's like if you're an artist, you kind of go into art because you love it in the beginning, and then eventually it become a career, and then you become survive or have to do the grow up thing. But the thing is, if we are too focused in just the career and commercial, and we can slowly lose touch with what make us happy in the beginning, which is just drawing or painting make us happy, which is who we are down inside. So I would guess one thing I see is there's a lot of the time I tend to see people sometimes forget to go back and in touch with what make them happy early on. So I guess I would say separate work and separate there's work art, and there's art for yourself. Because I think at the end of the day, I feel like at one point, at least with me, at one point in my career, I feel like I feel I'm tired of making art for studio. It is good money, but I miss my own voice and I want to do my own thing. To have the ability to create art for yourself is actually very powerful, and that is what keep an artist alive for a longer lifespan. So I would say always protect part of.
Nice. I definitely relate with that because there was this time that I was making. I remember that I wanted to become an artist as a professional, and
Mhm.
the thing that happened is that I discovered that I made art more as a way to relax myself, like more as a
Mhm.
hobby. But when I put the pressure of the professional thing on top of it, it became another stress.
Yeah.
And that was like the realization that, and I was like drawing, and since I was a kid and I had this idea that I wanted to become a professional, that's when I realized like, oh, like this is something that makes me happy, but it's not necessarily something that I want to make a job.
Right. Yeah.
And that realization that this is a job,
Yeah.
it really dawned on me way different. Uh, Also, I see many people, especially since you made this jump to another country. I think that maybe that this might have been some challenge for you, but in the creative industry, there is a lot of shy people.
Mhm.
There is a lot of introverts. There is a lot of people who have really hard problems socializing with others,
Yeah.
and that's kind of a necessity because you need to network. You need to create your connections in order to get a job.
Right.
Uh, have you dealt with this yourself, or have you seen people deal with it? And if so, how did it happen?
That's a good question. For me, I'm a little bit introvert, but I do need a friend along. So I think it's always good to make friends with. I think one trick I find is helpful is even with introvert, we just being introvert, we don't feel comfortable go out to big party and talk to a stranger. But we do a lot of the introvert like myself. We like close friends. You like hang out with a small group of people, friends that you feel comfortable and talk about stuff you like. So what I end up feel like, what I end up doing is I make friends with other artists, and when I make friends, I try to make friends and not just for business. I try to be there, like try to be friends, like real friends, and you hang out and you do normal friend stuff, and we also talk about work stuff, but you also include friend stuff. So when you start make when you make friends with other people, and the way I network is that if I find people I enjoy working with or have potential work with, I try to know them more than just business. I try to develop friendship with them. Once there is a friendship, it's a little bit less stressful for introvert, because with introvert we know we need to hustle, but it's not natural for us. But then once you become friends of other artists, of other people you work with, that relationship change. When you see each other, it's not just hustle, and it's like you become like friends, or some of them become best friend and become almost like a family. Then when you see them, say, hey, how are you doing? What have you up to? What's your kids doing? How's school? How's work? What movie you watched lately? So that can make you feel much less pressure. And sometimes you can go out for a nice lunch or have coffee, just do stuff for fun, not necessarily all the time is business. And when business come along, you can call them up, hey, I have this project, I would like to work with you, or do you have project for me? In that case, when you communicate, it's business, but it's much more friendly and it's easier. I think it's also a good way to develop relationships. So not everything is business. You can build a nice network of professional friends that's beyond business, and it is like a community and support for each other, go for good times and bad times. I think that is good for everyone's career and social life in general. I don't, does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Also, this is a really hard question, but I still like to ask it because sometimes it gets interesting answers. Imagine that you wake up tomorrow in another dimension and nobody knows about you, but you still have your skills, you still have your experience, you have a computer, and you have $500 in your pocket.
Uh-huh.
What do you do to get at this point of your career as soon as possible?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess if I wake up at a different dimension, I have a little bit money to pay bill and have computer, I think I would tell them the story from my dimension. I think people will be interested. So it's almost like you go to a different country and you want to make friends, and story is always a good way to break the ice, and I can just tell them my story. And I think if I'm from different dimension, I'm sure they will find my story interesting because they don't know anything about Earth. And I can probably embellish and make everything more interesting and fun. I think we can, that's kind of a storyteller. Do you travel around and tell people story from a foreign land? And if I have my computer, I probably still have my painting and drawing and maybe some animation. And I say, hey, this is what my world looks like. And then you start telling story. So it's like cool. Maybe I can make a living telling story and people give me money so I can buy food.
That is awesome. Also, is there any advice for young professionals that you would like to give that we haven't talked about into this interview?
I think for young professional, one of my advice is also from my own experience. I would say, I guess, especially young in terms, I would say young professional especially when you first started, from student to get your first job. I know a lot of at least for myself, when I was a student or when I was really young, I always have dream job in my mind. The dream job has a little checklist. I want this, I want that, I want that, I want that. I'm sure everyone have that kind of list. While those lists are great to set up a goal for yourself, I feel that early on in my career, I've made a little bit of a mistake, but I can't realize fast enough is, but in the beginning when I try to look for a job, I always feel like I need that job to have something checked off for my list. If it doesn't match what I want in my list, I'm not interested. But then eventually I realized that's very unrealistic because sometimes whenever you start a new career, you have to learn to earn yourself to get to a certain point. You can check a lot of stuff off a list. So my advice is it's good to have a checklist or a dream job, but I think is important is whatever opportunity come your way, doesn't matter big or small or something might seem irrelevant to what you want to do, I would suggest you take the opportunity seriously and try to learn and make friends with the people you get to work with and develop good relationship, because A is a small industry. A lot of the time, same group of people you will work in the future. And B is sometimes an experience that doesn't seem important when you at one point, it could be a very important skill down the road. You just never know. When I first started, I'm just doing PA for a studio, and being a PA is, I want to be an artist, I want to be an animator, but when I first started, I'm just a little PA. And PA, you don't get to do any art. You just run around, deliver coffee, make photocopy for people, pretty much like a little page boy, kind of running around the studio, helping people out. Didn't get to do anything glamorous. But eventually, down the road, even something as unimportant as that kind of job, I find very beneficial, because I get to learn how a whole studio functions. You get to meet different people at work, and get to learn how different group of people, team organize their production. So later on down the road, when I become a lead or supervisor, I can also kind of relate to how one department work with the other department. So because when you're starting working at, say, an animation department, you tend to just stuck in that department. But early on in my career, since I have to do some running around studio kind of job, it just helped me to understand the process better. And also, when you communicate with different people, you learn different communication skill with different people as well. So I would say opportunity come along is important. And we all have experience. Sometimes we got a good gig. Sometimes we got a really bad gig and frustrating client. Even though those are bad experience, but you also learn a lot from bad experience. So I would say take every opportunity seriously, and that could come in handy someday. You never know. You just never know. The industry changed so fast, so anything you can learn always come back down the road and be helpful in the future.
Definitely. And talking about changes, how do you think virtual reality is going to affect the industry of animation and illustration?
Yeah, it's hard to know, but I wouldn't be surprised that would be the new form of entertainment in a few years or within the next decade. I don't think it will replace any current entertainment. I would say it's something new. I'm quite excited about it. And I'm kind of curious how the virtual reality painting, like quill, something like quill or tube brush, will affect future artists. I get to try a little bit of that. I think it's really fun. I think it will be something new and exciting. And it probably will be like when we suddenly have 3D movie, and now we are going to have virtual reality. I think it would be extra more stuff I open up more opportunity for more people. I wouldn't get worried that it will replace current skill and current artists. I just feel like it will just expand, give more people more opportunity.
I definitely think so too. Also, if people want to find you online, where will be the best place to do so?
Well, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and all my handler and even my website is my name, so that make it easy to remember. So just Alina Chau, you can either Google or website will be alinachau.com. Instagram, literally Alina Chau. Same with Facebook, Alina Chau. So I think if you just type my name, it should be pretty easy to hunt me down online.
Thanks a lot for giving us a little bit of your time and your experience. I truly appreciate that you have made a little bit of space to talk with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Rodriguez.
So this has been the last episode of the Creative Hoster Show. If you like this interview, click the like button below and also share this interview with your friends. Until next time.